I'm here with Paul Cooke from France Mission. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Andy. Lovely to see you.
It's good to meet you. We touched base through the Christian Resources exhibition in Solihull a little while back, did we not?
That's right. Yeah, I think I know we had a stand there. I wasn't there in person, but I know that you had a chat with the two folk who were on our stand. So it was lovely to make that connection with you.
Yeah, as my operations manager, we got a free ticket. So it's like, yeah, let's get there. So he went around and met some people, which is brilliant. And he met some really interesting folk like yourself. And it's like, yeah, these are the people who want to share their story a little bit. So for the uninitiated, just give us a quick overview. What is France Mission all about?
So our main thing is trying to connect British Christians, particularly who have some kind of heart for France. So it could be that they like holidaying there. Maybe they've got business connections. They might have family or friends who live over there. They might have studied the language, or just enjoy going there for whatever reason at all, and helping them to think a little bit more about France, not just being a place that we like to go to and whose produce we like to consume, but actually as a place where God has a mission. And so we try and connect people who have a natural interest with France, shall we say, with what the Lord is doing supernaturally over there. So we do that particularly through providing prayer materials and opportunities to be involved in various projects that are going on. But anybody who's got a francophone heart, we like to try and connect them with the Lord's work over there.
So I guess you wouldn't be the classic kind of missionary organization that people might immediately think of. You're not just sending out missionaries into France.
No.
Actually, you're working in quite a different way.
Yeah. So we're not a sending organisation. You're absolutely right. We have partners in France, and our main partner organisation is a church planting organisation in France that's called Perspectives in English. So we support a number of British people who have gone out to work with them over the years. And we also support quite a lot of French nationals who are already part of that organisation but need an extra bit of help with a particular project or just at a particular season. We're very much about trying to support the French church do what they are called to do, because the best people to reach French people are French people. And of course, people from other nationalities have a role to play. But definitely we want to support the national church and encourage them in what they're doing in quite a small way, because the church is reasonably large now in France, certainly compared to what it used to be. That we're just grateful to the Lord for having had the opportunity over the past 50 years to be a small part of what he's doing over there.
Wow, 50 years. That's been going a while. Are you actually 50 years, or is it nearly? Are you past that now?
Nearly. I think it's April of next year, 2024. God willing, that'll be our 50th anniversary. So that's rather exciting. Yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Oh, come back to us for that. I'd love to talk to you again at 50. So I think one of the things that I found interesting is a lot of organizations now, rather than just throwing, so to speak, metaphorically, rather than throwing missionaries at a problem, more and more ministries now are saying, okay, well, who lives in that area? How can we support those people? Because those are the ones that are best, like you said, they're best suited to evangelize where they are. So children in schools are going to be the best evangelists in schools. People who work in offices, that's the best place. And yes, a missionary with a capital M, I suppose, is wonderful. I see myself in some ways as a digital missionary. I think that's part of what I do. But I can't speak to people one at a time. And I think that's what I've seen a change, perhaps. I don't know what your thoughts are on this one, but I think I've seen a change of people rather than just putting missionaries and off you go. How can we support what's always there? And I remember Brother Andrew, it's what's left. How can you support what's already there? They might be struggling, but it's there. God's church is still there. So just curious what your thoughts are on that one. It's just come to my mind.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It's been one of the shifts in our church mindsets, I think, over the last 10 or 20 years. I think it's begun to happen. And we've seen the UK has become statistically increasingly less Christian in the number of people who are attending church, the number of people who are exposed to Christian teaching in schools or in their homes as well. So I think our sense of ourselves as a Christian sending nation has probably had a reality check. and our sense also of the world as a much bigger place where God is at work has certainly also been corrected over that period. So I think a lot of people now realise, I hope a lot of people now realise that the majority of Christians throughout the world are in the global south. The traditional missionary sending nations of North America and Europe, Western Europe in particular, are no longer the places where the majority of God's work is being done. And the number of missionaries actually from the global south is growing hugely. So I think many of us are seeing that the Lord is absolutely using people all around the world to contribute to the extension of His kingdom. And we have a part to play in that in the UK, and part of that part to play is by having people who have that sense of call to go out and serve in other nations. But I was in a really interesting webinar yesterday all about mission and money, and certainly one of the things that we have still relatively an abundance of in the West is funding, and whereas some of the places where the church is growing fast, they may not have very much funding. So we can contribute to what the Lord is doing around the world in lots of different ways, certainly by going, also by giving, but most importantly through praying. But to have that global sense of what God is doing, I think is a very welcome change in the missionary scene in the UK.
Yeah, it's something I've observed. I was just curious about you as an organisation that isn't that sort of classic model of sending, but yeah, that's sort of confirming some of my own thoughts, I guess, really. So France Mission, it's nearly 50 years old. Has it changed then? Was it more of a classic mission sending, or is it always been in the same sort of model?
No, it's always really been in the same model. When it was founded 50 years ago, it was founded by a group of, at the time, very young Christians. When I look back at the story, I'm kind of surprised how young they were. They're in their early 20s. They had been out with OM in the sort of back end of the 60s, early 70s, and quite a lot of British evangelical Christians would do that. In that period, because I suppose it was accessible as a place to go. But as they came back, they realised that the church in France, the evangelical church in France, was really quite fragile, really very small, and needed help. And they just felt compelled to do something about that. So initially, it was supporting just one missionary couple who were working in France, and then gradually it grew. To be praying more broadly. That initial couple were based in Brittany, and it kind of grew from that sort of northwest corner of France. And today we have links with churches all around France, really, but there are still pockets of France where we as an organisation don't particularly have a strong connection. So the southwest of France would be the obvious place where we have fewer connections, but other organisations are very active there. So if you look at our map of the places we connect with, it looks like there's a bit of a desert in the southwest. But that's not because God isn't at work. It's just because we don't happen to have many connections down there. So it's certainly changed over the years. And obviously the number of people who are involved in supporting it has grown considerably over the years. I think probably one of the things we have noticed is that whereas there was a season where France seemed quite exotic, and so if people were thinking about overseas mission, perhaps that would be their first place they thought about. I think that has changed quite a lot now. Travel is easier. The world seems smaller in some respects, and perhaps for a lot of people, France doesn't seem terribly exciting any longer. If you want to do a short-term mission, well, perhaps we'll go to North Africa, or perhaps we'll go to South America or the Far East. But Europe as a whole, certainly there's still plenty of work to be done in an increasingly de-Christianized Europe, I would say.
Very much. I shared this with you before, but my wife actually came to faith in France whilst on her year abroad. So she was modern languages. So she did 6 months in France. She went to Germany for 6 months, and she was living in Lyon, France, when she actually came to faith. It's quite a it's very much a Paul on the road to Damascus kind of testimony. I won't steal her thunder. It's amazing. But she found, it's like, what's going on? It was spiritual. You need a vicar. Well, we don't speak French Christian language. What's about that? And they found an English speaking church with an English guy and his wife. And he came as a vicar, and he came and prayed for them and said, this is what's going on. And
Wonderful.
so I've got photos, which I still really treasure, that someone took for her, of a baptism in a lake in France on her year out in the 90s.
Brilliant.
So,
that's wonderful.
God is at work, you know, and it's a special connection for us, because that's the real beginning of her faith journey in her early 20s, is meeting God in a very, I suppose, Christian desolate is how she would probably describe it back then. And but God's still at work. The bride of Christ is still alive.
Amen.
So what's your story and journey into France mission? What's your story of faith, and how did you do what you do?
How far back do you want me to go?
Far back as you want. I love history and stories.
Okay. So I have an unusual background in the sense that I was brought up as a Christadelphian. So a lot of people won't have heard of Christadelphians, but I would say they're a non-Orthodox Christian group, which kind of began in the mid-19th century, became quite strong, particularly in the Midlands and the large cities of the UK, has probably been in fairly serious decline since the late 20th century, but they don't really hold to the main tenets of Christian doctrine. So once I went to university and discovered that there were other expressions of faith which I hadn't really encountered as a child, not meaningfully anyway, that started me asking questions. But if you grow up in the kind of environment that I did, lots of lovely people, but it's a hard environment to leave in some respects when your family is part of that. So it was quite a long journey out, and I had to make sure that I did a lot of theological reading to make sure that I was convinced in my own mind that Orthodox Christianity absolutely was a faithful understanding of the biblical record. So that took me a while. I'm somebody who likes to read and to think, so I took my time over that. But when we moved to Exeter in the late 1990s, we already had one child and one was on the way, and my wife and I felt that we couldn't, we needed to make a decision about what we were going to do. And so when I came to Exeter, I made the decision to check out an evangelical church. And the one that was closest to where I was staying at the time was the church that we've been in ever since. And it's proved to be a great spiritual home for us, and for our children as they grew up. So I came here, Exeter, as a lecturer in French. That was my profession, having studied undergraduate, postgraduate, and then went into academia. And it was at the church where we're members that somebody said to me back in the early 2000s, "Have you ever considered going into Christian ministry?" And I said to him, "Well, no, because I love my job as an academic. I love what I do. Why would I go into Christian ministry?" It never crossed my mind, really. But that elderly gentleman, that elderly brother, he planted a seed, which just kind of began to send out shoots. And over the next 6 years or so, I just prayed about that. And I felt the Lord was saying to me, "Paul, I want you to do something different for the second half of your working life." And I just had no idea what that was going to be. But we came to a point at the university where I was relatively senior, and they had one of their periodical invitations to people to take early retirement because they needed to save a bit of money. And so I prayed about that and said, "Lord, if it's the right thing, just let me see that." I felt it was the right thing to do. So I handed in my notice. I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, but was fairly confident the Lord would know. And within a day or so, the job with France Mission was advertised. And I felt, well, okay, that feels like a door I need to have a bit of a push at. And so, I applied for it and was blessed to be appointed. I had already started, I'd gone part-time at my job at the university and had already started working for the church where I was a member. So I already had a little bit of insight into what Christian ministry was about. But it took that, I think, to really just have that sense that the Lord had his hand over this, and that it was time to do something else. And I'm absolutely not saying to anybody who's listening that I think a professional Christian job is anywhere more important or more significant than a secular job. It's just that I felt that the Lord was saying to me, the time for you has come to have a change. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah, I've done full-time church Christian ministry, and I've been a trucker as well. And it's very different. It's totally different. It's a different way of, it's a different lifestyle is how I'd probably put it. It's not just a job, it is a way of life, because it isn't just something you go to work and you come back.
Yeah.
When you're in full-time Christian ministry, you go to sleep thinking and praying about the people that you're going to see in the morning in a way that you wouldn't do quite the same.
Yeah,
I've had a few conversations over these. Oh, it's just the same. It's just different. No, it really is. I've done both things, and full-time or being part-time ministry is very different. And missionary work, I've did that for a year. That's different again. Like you say, it's not more important or less. It's not just different function. It is a way of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's very true. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to. It has to be something that you feel called to, and you absolutely need the Lord's strength to do it, because there will be lots of challenges along the way, but there will certainly be lots of joys too. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what's your role within France Mission? What is it? What's your day-to-day role? What's a week look like for you?
So we're a very small organisation. So I have the grand title of UK Director, but in fact I'm really the only. Well, I'm not quite the only employee, because my wife does a very small amount of financial and administrative work to help me, which is great. But I'm a 0.8 and she's like a 0.05 or something like that. So we're a very small organization. I work from home. So I'm in my office at the moment, and a lot of my week is just spent here behind this computer. So a lot of the times I'm communicating with people in France, either through Zooms, as we're doing at the moment, or through phone calls or email or what have you. I'm also connecting quite a lot with our supporters, who are a wonderful bunch, and who are often sending me messages to ask questions about various things, or a bit more information about this, or can you help me with I'm going to France, can you help me finding a church, or whatever it happens to be. So a lot of time is spent here. But of course, I also do get out and about. So for me, going out and visiting churches to talk about France Mission is a great privilege. So I was recently up in Cambridge doing that, and I go to France, not like super regularly, but maybe 2 or 3 times a year I'm in France. So this time last month, I was over in France for a big gathering of the main organisation that we work with for the families and the workers who are involved, kind of like a spring harvest, but on a much smaller scale. So it was great to spend time there, just connecting with people. Did quite a lot of videos with folks so that we could send out updates to supporters. So yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff, and also quite a lot of financial stuff, because we obviously receive gifts for the workers, so we have to make sure that we thank people appropriately, that we account for things properly. And as any charity, there's an awful lot of behind the scenes stuff that you need to do to make sure that you are compliant with all the regulations, and that you are quite rightly kind of making sure that everything you do is transparent, not just for the authorities, but of course most importantly for our supporters. So yeah, I'm pretty busy, and then the rest of my week I'm quite involved with my local church, so that makes sure I get to see plenty of real people as well as people behind screens. So that's a good balance for me.
Yeah, there is a difference, the digital and the face-to-face. And I know COVID kind of introduced lots of people to digital interfacing, so to speak. But yeah, I still prefer the handshake and how are you being in a room. There's no stuttering or buffering, is there?
No, that's very true. Yeah,
not too much anyway. Right. So, in terms of churches that are being supported by you, where you've got connections in France, how many? You talked about sort of everywhere for yourselves, except for most of the southwest. But how many churches are we talking? If I went to France, I'm saying I'm going to this region. What sort of chances there that there might be a church you could connect me to?
Okay, so wherever you go in France, there will be a church, probably within within an hour's drive, but it might be an hour's drive. So I think that's one of the main differences with the UK, where it might not be a church that you would necessarily want to spend the rest of your life in, but it's a church that you'd be perfectly happy worshipping in, probably within either walking distance or like a 15-minute, 20-minute drive of where you live. That's fairly common, I think, here in the UK. But in France, that's not always the case. So just to give it an order of scale, there are about 2,500 evangelical churches in France. And that's about one for every 27,000 people in France. So ideally, we'd like to have one for every 10,000 people in France, which means planting another 4,000 churches. So that's kind of more than, obviously it's, you've got 2.5 at the moment. You can do that. That's how you can do the maths. I don't think I could do the maths, but it's quite a lot more, isn't it, than are currently there. And we have close connections with about 90 or so. But then we have, through our network, we can find out about most of those 2,500 other churches. So I would be fairly confident I could identify churches that you could go and visit. And I do my best to find out a little bit more about them. What kind of denomination are they? Are they like to have any English speakers? If you don't speak French, you might be able to help you. Those kinds of things we're able to help with.
Well, I guess, UK to France, we've got the Channel Tunnel. There's lots of trade, lots of commerce. I went 3 times in school. It was just, it's what you did. A few might go to Spain on a trip, but France was the easiest foreign country to get into. I don't think that's changed all that dramatically. In fact, it's probably more simple and straightforward in some ways. But so what you're really doing is, if I'm going to France, I'm saying, right, I'm going to Clermont-Ferrand, I'm going to the Pyrenees, I'm going to Lyon. I would then be able to contact you, and you'd say, look, there are churches here, here, and here. For your 2-week holiday, and you can help people. Or I'm going to move. I'm going to live in Lille. And you can say, right. So that's the kind of thing you do.
Exactly. Yeah. So quite a lot of people contact us when they're planning their holidays. And I'm always really encouraged by that, because I think that when we go on holiday, it's kind of tempting sometimes to think, I'll just have a little holiday from church. But it's so encouraging for us and for the people that we might be visiting to say, no, let's go and visit a local church. And we might not be able to speak the language. I don't think that matters for one Sunday a year. I think just being able to spend time with the Lord's people, be encouraged by seeing their faith and the reality of what it's like for them to be a Christian where they are, and to encourage them through your presence. It's just a living thing that says we're in this together. We're family together. So we love encouraging people to do that. And of course, if people are moving, we would love to help people with that. There are certain areas where there's quite large British contingents, and I know there are some expat churches which we don't work with typically directly, because we want to particularly reach French natives, or at least people who are permanently kind of working in the French language in France. But there are little enclaves where there's the Anglican diocese in Europe, which have their churches, and there are independent churches that have sprung up as well in British speaking areas. So we can help folk connect with those different things.
Fab. I love the heart of what you're doing, but just going back a little bit, excuse me, we're talking about how being in full-time Christian ministry, it's a way of life. In the same context, becoming a Christian, a follower of Jesus, is a way of life. And like you say, we shouldn't be going away for 2 weeks and thinking, we'll skip church, because actually that's kind of what we should be doing. I love that people can go on holiday and think, how do I get to church? And also, I've just been reading Brother Andrew's book from Open Doors, which is why I keep quoting it. But it was that encouragement of one nation's Christians meeting with another nation's Christians, and the very unique and potent encouragement that we can be across borders. And that's really, from my perspective of what I'm hearing, that's kind of where you guys can step in and say, let me connect you in a way that can build that encouragement thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the early church was a church where people were mixing from all different nationalities and all different backgrounds, and the more that we can capture some of that truly international feel of what the kingdom of Jesus is about. I think the healthier we'll be as a result, definitely.
I have to leave that interview there because that is as beautiful as it gets as an ending. Just give us the website. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, you go to www.francemission.org, and there's a contact form there. And as I've already explained, I'm pretty much the only employee, so I'll be the one who's responding to you if you do get in touch, and that'd be a pleasure to do that.
Fabulous. I can't think of a better place to finish an interview, really. That just is great. Let's encourage one another. That's a really good thing to do. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I love finding meeting people and hearing their stories. I love when I say, how did you get involved with this organization? Often there's a little smile, and I know someone is going to be coming. That's great. And I love it. So thank you for telling us some of your story as well. So that was great. Thank you so much, Paul. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.